Hello, and welcome to Career Landscapes, a peek into professional lives, brought to you by One Voice for Change. I'm your host, Felicity Minch, and today we have the honor of speaking with Brad Bernthal, Associate Professor at the Colorado Law School and Executive Director at the University of Colorado Boulder's Silicon Flatirons Center. I'd like to take a moment and read a bit about him. Brad is an associate professor at Colorado Law School. He specializes in startups, entrepreneurial law, and early stage finance, such as angel and venture capital investments. Brad's research examines issues including investment accelerators, startup investment, and negotiation. Brad is the executive director at CU Boulder's Silicon Flatirons Center. Brad also serves as director of Silicon Flatirons Entrepreneurship Initiative. The Entrepreneurship Initiative, launched in 2008, creates a high velocity of interaction between the CU campus and the Front Range's high-tech entrepreneurial community. Brad is also a tennis enthusiast and leads a mental training group for competitive tennis players called Brain Cramp Camp. Welcome, Brad. Thank you for being with me today.
Honored to be with you. Thank you, Felicity.
Well, I have to ask, what is Brain Cramp Camp?
I think I use the gentle term to describe myself as tennis enthusiast. Maybe a more accurate term would be tennis wacko. I still love the game. I played in college. I made some money at the game afterwards, but not enough to cover my costs. So as a professional, I lost money playing tennis, but continue to love the game. And I've become more and more interested in the mental side of tennis performance. I know that you are a classical guitarist, and so I suspect that you think deeply about some of the factors that allow you some days to play at the very best you potentially can be, and other days maybe less so. And on those days in which you're performing a little bit lower level, what are the things that go into allowing yourself to work your way into the zone? That's very much the kind of questions that we ask at Brain Cramp Camp. And then we teach students tools and techniques to recognize, I'm not feeling 100% today. What can I do to work myself towards a performance that, at least based on what I have today, I can do the best I can?
Interesting. It is fascinating. We do have to have mental capacity. And in today's world, focus is really a gold mine. Those who can focus and focus for a length of time. And I find that in music too. We need to be focused for a long time and not be distracted. So that must help with entrepreneurial startups. That must help with everything that you're doing. Yeah, give us a little bit about your background and all.
Well, can I pick up on the idea of focus for
Yeah,
just a moment,
please.
which is what we bring our attention to in tennis performance can matter a lot.
Mhm.
So, for example, on the tennis court, an average point lasts somewhere between 6 and 11 seconds.
Oh,
And then in between points, you go to pick up the balls, you get ready for the next point. That takes about 20 to 25 seconds. So you're basically spending at least twice as much time in between the points as you are playing the points. And so where your focus is during that time is enormously impactful as to whether you feel confident, energized, engaged, relaxed, or do you spend time thinking destructively in a way that leaves you feeling more nervous, more anxious and tight for that next point? And so it turns out that if you sit and think about, am I playing well? Am I playing poorly? Am I going to win? Am I going to lose? If that's where your focus is, that usually impairs performance. Whereas if you bring your attention to things like, where's my breathing? Am I feeling relaxed? What is my the tactic or the game plan for the next point? those are areas of focus that turn out to be very constructive on the court. I don't know what areas of focus you bring yourself to while you're playing the guitar, but I think your point about focus is super well taken. And then it's really interesting. What do you bring your focus to?
It is. We have the same thing in music. We cannot be distracted by the audience or by, um, something falling on the ground or somebody dropping something or whispering something. We are completely focused on the sound. And even when we walk on stage, how we walk on stage makes a difference. So we're always thinking tempo, or I'm thinking tempo, I'm thinking the music, I'm thinking relax, I'm breathing. It's very similar.
I'm hearing you say things that bring you into the present moment.
Yes. Yeah.
And, that's another element of focus and performance that when we deal in the present and are able to limit our future trips
Mhm.
and limit our thoughts about what just happened on the note that you missed 5 seconds ago, that's where the zone is. And that's a really interesting dimension of focus and ways to bring our attention into the present.
Yeah, definitely. Because the students must, when they miss a ball or they miss a hit, they can't be thinking I'm terrible, I'm bad, oh, I'm stupid. They can't go into negative talk. And I tell the guitar students too, you do not go into negative talk if you miss a note. You just don't.
100%. I'm trying to think of a gracious way to transition into entrepreneurial law and venture capital from there. I'm not sure if there is one, but we'll try. We'll see if we get there in the next 45 minutes.
Well, I was just, well, I think our discussion about focus is so well needed in today's world and with our youth. But yes, do tell me about what you do at CU and just a bit about your background.
Yeah. I it's been one part intentional journey, one part accidental journey. The intentional part is I kind of come from a line of teachers and preachers, and I decided that I didn't really want to be a preacher, but I wanted desperately to be a teacher and a professor. And so that part of my journey has been intentional. It's been very rewarding to have, really a privilege of working with students who are super high functioning at Colorado Law School, as well as students across the CU Boulder campus. The accidental part for me is I did not have any idea that I would work with entrepreneurs or in the emerging company community or really with business people. That was not on my radar. I fell into a position of leading a clinic at the law school. A clinic is kind of like the lab of a law school where students actually do real work for real clients in a supervised setting. And so I was the supervisor for our entrepreneurial law clinic. Those students act as attorneys for, let's say you want to start a new business, and they'll say, Felicity, well, tell me a little bit about what kind of business you're going to do. And they say, well, based on this, you might want to be an LLC and not a C corporation. And here's why. And tell me about the key ideas that's going to make this business a success. And, well, here's an intellectual property strategy that will help protect it. And so that's what the students do. And by being part of that clinic, I then thought I should go meet some of these entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And so I go out in the community and I'd say, Felicity, tell me your story about launching the company or launching the startup of the nonprofit of One Voice for Change. And I found I just love meeting people who are creating something from nothing. People who are generating new ideas and standing up companies from scratch. It just, one of the highest forms, I think, of what humans can do. And I became really compelled by that part of what happens here. And then there's also a certain community aspect that's unique when you're talking about startups and new businesses. It really takes, no one goes it alone in this world. And so I became very interested in the community aspect of it as well. So that's been an accidental journey that I did not expect to enjoy as much as I have, but that's kind of how I got here.
Oh, that's That's wonderful. That's incredible. Most of our lives, part of it is accidental, but we have to take the accident and make something good out of it. So, uh, that's incredible.
Yeah, and maybe I'll take that opportunity. Accident, serendipity,
Yeah.
um, and luck, right? So I
Uh,
think we routinely underestimate the role of luck, both good and bad in our lives.
mhm,
We have stories about when things go well. Well, obviously there's a reason it went well, and when something fails, there must be a reason. And sometimes we just underestimate luck. And I say that because when I got interested in startups in Boulder, it was about 2005. And at that point, Boulder had an entrepreneurial history. There were natural products companies like Wild Oats and Celestial Seasonings that had come out of the Boulder scene.
mhm,
There was also a number of storage and technology companies, starting with Storage Tech and others that grew from that was here. But in 2005, I see my video has frozen. Let me try to adjust that. In 2005, there was kind of a magical moment around software and mobile technologies. The iPhone was just coming out, and there was a real movement. And in Boulder, Rally Software had just launched, that ended up going public. Zayo launched in 2006, that went public, a massive telecommunications company. A venture capital fund called Foundry Group was just being formed. That turned out to be a really important thing. And as impactful as any of them, an accelerator that supports startups called Techstars was just getting off the ground. And I'm omitting quite literally dozens and dozens of other important companies. And so there was this thing going on. And
mhm,
so I was playing into something that was much larger than me. There's some good luck that was just associated with that too.
mhm. And it's amazing where we're born and who we're born to and how we're raised and our environment. That all plays a role also,
I
definitely.
agree. And so then the question, if you're a student thinking about this today and they're like, Brad, Felicity, well, I'm glad luck smiled upon you. How can I make luck smile upon me? Um, Obviously, luck, it is what it is. But if you're looking at this from a business lens, one way to be lucky is to bet into some macros that you think the future is going to favor. So I'll give you some examples of what I mean by that. Right now, the space industry, the commercial space industry, is growing exponentially. If you are a student who's 17 years old and you think that's going to continue for the next 15 years, you might think about a career in the space industry. Yeah, if you don't like aerospace, you're not an engineer, you don't have to do that, but you might be in marketing and you might think about that as a sector that's going to be growing. Um, Quantum computing is starting to hit. It really hasn't commercially exploded yet. It probably will in the next 5 to 15 years. Might be an interesting macro to play into if you know that there's going to be a lot of wealth creation and innovation in that area. That's a way to be both lucky and a little bit smart.
Yes, yes, definitely. What kind of educational background should a student look into if they want to be an entrepreneur and they've got great ideas? Where should they start when they're exiting high school?
Yeah. Um, I think that it's an important question because the answer is there is no one size fits all.
Right.
Occasionally, you'll see what's called a solopreneur who really does go it by themselves, but that is, at least in terms of companies that are scalable, that is, companies that can grow to a significant size, it is very, very rare to see someone go by themselves. The key insight here is it takes a team to grow a company. And so, whether an individual is on the business side and goes to, say, business school, or on the technical side and becomes an engineer or a computer scientist or maybe a data scientist, or comes from the humanities and does economics or political science or psychology or philosophy, any of those skill sets can be a powerful part of a startup team. The key piece that someone needs to realize is, oh, my major as an undergrad was philosophy. I have a humanities background. We're trying to build a space startup. I better find an engineer who thinks that she wants to join me on this crazy venture to balance out the team. And if we've got an engineer and a philosophy major, well, we might want to get an operations person out of the business school. And so you put together a team that complements your skill set, that shares a common passion for what you're doing, and then you better like each other because building businesses are hard. It's an intense relationship with your co-founders. That's the way that I would think about it. I don't think there's just one background that's going to become a great entrepreneur. You really need great teams.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. So what would some of the legal challenges be on when in an early startup? What are some of the big challenges legally?
Yeah. Well, let me back up and say, um, I generally don't think that the legal will ever make the startup a success. So I can be the best lawyer in the world for you, Felicity, and get your documents as airtight as possible.
Right.
That is not going to make the company a success. And I think that's important for entrepreneurs to be aware of because sometimes individuals will come and they think, I call it, if you build it, they will come strategy. Like we just get the legal right, the business is going to work. No. Like you better have an idea. What's the business plan here? How does this make money? What's the pain that you're solving? What's the solution? So let's just start there. The legal is not going to make it a success, but the legal can screw it up. And so if you have a really good business idea and we don't get it buttoned up from a legal perspective, then things can crater because the legal wasn't done properly. So that's generally how I think about the legal strategy early on. So let's talk about a couple of the ways that things can go wrong from a legal perspective. And I think there's two or three that I would focus entrepreneurs to think about from the start. Number one is most companies that fail because of people issues. That is, the co-founders have disagreements. Maybe they never really agreed about what they were doing in the first place. And so, what does that look like? Well, for starters, if you and I and a third person are starting a company, we should sit down and talk about, Felicity, what are you going to do for this company? Are you going to work full time to do that? How long do we think it's going to take to accomplish those things? Brad, what are you bringing to the table? What are you going to bring to the company? And we'd ask the same thing for the third person, right? Okay. Well, how do we value those contributions? That's a difficult conversation because, of course, I think what I'm doing is the most important thing for the company. And Felicity thinks that what you're doing is the most important thing. So those can be delicate, difficult conversations that people often avoid. But I would encourage and do encourage co-founders to sit down and talk about what are you going to do? Is it a full-time or a part-time basis? And let's talk about the relative values because that is going to lead to who's going to own what in the company. Are we going one third, one third, one third? Or does Felicity own 60%? I own 20%, and someone else owns 20%. And so those are conversations I encourage entrepreneurs to have earlier. One way to protect against certain problems, like Brad starts with the company, owns 20% of it, but gets an offer to go to Google tomorrow, and I leave. Well, how do you feel if I take 20% of the company but don't contribute anything? You're demoralized, you're upset. Those are the kinds of things that kill companies. So, one thing that you can put in place from a legal perspective is we can agree to a vesting agreement. And that is you own 60% today, I own 20% today. But if we leave within a certain period of time, we have not earned that ownership and we'd forfeit it back to the company so that I don't walk away with that 20% ownership. That ownership would essentially go back to the company, and then you could get somebody else to be a co-founder. So number one is the people issues. Talk about who's contributing what, figure out who owns what, and then you might at least consider a vesting agreement to protect against people from walking away. Second, go ahead.
Oh, and who pays? I mean, who's putting up the funding? But we can get to funding later if you
Yeah,
want.
I might delay that because it's possible that we might be self-funding the company.
Mhm.
We might have a product that we're able to sell to fund the company, or we might raise some money from a third-party investor. So maybe we'll put that up on the table just for a second.
Right.
A second key piece I think that founders want to think about from the legal perspective is what are the ideas that are going to make or break the company? What are the ideas that are sort of the crown jewels that we would like, if possible, to protect? Okay. So, for example, let's say that you and I are building a company, and let's go with the space industry just because we were talking about it. Okay. And, we think the special sauce that we have is some software that allows us to process information that's out there and realize where different devices are in space and have situational awareness so that, say, satellites don't run into each other. But we know that our secret is really the software. We've got a better kind of software. Well, we should probably think about how can we protect that software, and those are ideas. And so the way that you protect it is through intellectual property. So the first thing I'd ask is, well, Felicity, you're a genius programmer. You're writing this software. Let's make sure that that software is owned by the company and not Felicity individually. And so we might have an agreement, an employment agreement that says the intellectual property, the ideas that we create for the space company are going to be owned by the space company, not by us individually. And that can prevent a whole bunch of problems. So make sure that the company owns the key ideas that are going to make or break the company.
Mhm.
This is especially true if you're working with an independent contractor, that is someone who's not an employee of the company, but you're sort of saying, hey, we don't know how to code. Would you do this for us? You want to get a written agreement that transfers the ownership into the company. So that's a second piece. Think about the key ideas and make sure that the company is going to own them and have a smart intellectual property strategy from the get-go. I think I'll stop there. Those are two pretty important things. There's other things you might want to do at the start from a legal perspective, but bottom line, you're trying to get the legal buttoned up, not to make the company a success, but so if the company is a success, the legal is not going to be a problem.
Right, right. That is great advice. The kids will love hearing that. What other questions some of the kids have asked? What trends do you see shaping the future of startups? You had mentioned like the space industry, but in your position at CU, what do you see? The trends, where are the trends going? Is it really pushing towards, from what I read, of course, health is a big thing, AI, and of course, space, anything in aerospace. So
Yeah, and I should just be clear about the world in which I live. Our Silicon Flatiron Center is technology centric. And so anyone watching this, just know Brad is kind of thinking from that perspective. There are plenty of business opportunities that are not technology centric. So, for example, would I have invested in a little coffee company out of Seattle that thought that it could take Italian coffee shops and do one in Seattle and grow it? I've been like, that's a neat idea. Maybe they'll make one or two of these work. Would I have invested in Starbucks? No, I would have missed the whole thing, right? Like, so take this with a grain of salt. I think on the technology side, the three most interesting areas are space. I'm happy to talk about more of the sectors within the space industry if you
Right.
want.
Uh-huh.
Second, quantum computing, and third, artificial intelligence. Those are probably the three most important innovations in terms of technology that are going on. And I'm probably oblivious to certain things in biotechnology and medicine that are coming along, which may intersect. So, for example, advances in artificial intelligence are really changing how we make drugs. And so there's intersections there that are important. But those are three technologies, AI, quantum, space, I think are important. But to your point, another way to find good company ideas are just ask yourself, what problems in the world do we need to solve? What pains are out there that need to be addressed? So, for example, we have an aging population, especially in the United States, but even on a global scale, there are several countries that are aging, and there's important pain points to address. So, for example, my mother is living. My father passed away a couple years ago. My mother lives by herself in a retirement home. She's lonely. Are there solutions for loneliness as people are aging? Are there other pain points associated with aging that new technologies might be able to help address, or that old technologies and solutions can address? But fundamentally, when you start to look for patterns of problems in the world, that's a great way to find new companies. Last night, we just had a pitch night for a program that we run called Startup Summer. We had 10 new companies launch their ideas. And one of the clear parts of the zeitgeist right now among college students, do you want to take a guess as to what one of the themes were in terms of the pains that they see they're trying to solve?
Uh, I don't know.
Get off devices, get into the world, meet people. There were like
Oh,
5 different companies that were basically a variation of
I
how
see.
can we help people to get off social media and go interact with people in the world. So
Mhm.
they clearly are seeing a pain point of mental wellness and a
Mhm.
need for more social interaction in the real world. There were like 5 of the 10 companies were essentially trying to solve that kind of pain. So, in addition to thinking about technology, another way to find strong company ideas is what's a pain that needs to be resolved in the world? Go do it.
Mhm. Great advice. Yeah, let's talk about the space industry.
Yeah. So I've got to say, I didn't know much about this until 12 months ago. Started taking a close look at it. I really thought it was still science fiction. Let me just tell you, it's not. A couple parts of the commercial space industry that are here and now include communication satellites. So, for example, Elon Musk's company SpaceX has become super active in putting up what's called the Starlink system, which is a series of satellites that allow for communications in places where it's otherwise really difficult to, say, have internet connectivity. For example, the war in Ukraine, the Russians have knocked out a lot of the internet utility, especially on the battlefield. And so the Ukrainians are relying upon Starlink for their connectivity. Those are satellites that have been put up in space by SpaceX. Um, Associated with that, there's a lot of remote sensing of what's going on by satellites, what's going on Earth. What do fields look like? What does climate change look like? And so there's a lot of information that we're able to get from space now that we make critical decisions about. The launch industry is becoming important as we start to send more devices up into space. We have to launch it. So that's becoming something that's here and now. And then as you get a lot of more devices in space, monitoring that, having situational awareness so that devices don't run into each other, that becomes an industry. So all those things are here and now. And then as you look out a little further, there's some interesting things such as there are minerals that could be valuable on Earth and space, we will probably start to see space mining coming along in the coming years as well. So those are just a few examples of dimensions of commercial activity in space or getting things up to space. And then one more that's a real problem is what do we do with the stuff in space once its useful life is over?
There
Does it
is a
just
lot.
stay up there?
There's
Yeah, how do
space.
we clean up the debris? How do we deorbit things? And that's a big industry that's coming along. So all these things are happening now, and I would expect to see them only accelerate probably over the next decade, possibly 2 decades at least.
Right, right. And quantum computing, you mentioned that.
Yeah. You're not going to be able to get me to go much deeper about quantum because I still don't even understand it. There's a famous quote that Einstein doesn't play jokes, or Einstein said, God doesn't play jokes with the universe. And he was talking about the ability for a particle to kind of be two places at once.
Mhm.
Um, it turns out that that joke on the universe probably exists, and quantum takes advantage of it. Beyond that, students, go do your own work about learning what quantum is because I'm only going to mislead you. I can just tell you that in terms of the end results are computer systems that are orders of magnitude faster. It's going to change the way that computer security works, the kind of processing that we're able to do of information. And one of the hubs for quantum computing is here at CU Boulder and really throughout the Front Range. This is going to be one of the places. So it's coming. Also, some of the national labs here in the Front Range are doing important work in quantum. It's a thing.
Wow, incredible. And AI.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh, I'm guessing that many of the listeners and viewers of this have probably played around with generative AI like ChatGPT 4 or Gemini or other tools that are out there. Um, my sense is that the foundational models um, are so big, so data intensive, they require so much processing. There's probably not going to be a lot of opportunity for your average new company here in Boulder to build a new foundational model. I think that that's one part. But what agents ride on, or what they call it tuning, to create a product that sort of uses the foundational model, those companies are bubbling up here in Boulder and Denver and elsewhere. And so they sort of take the big data set of, say, a Chat GPT 4, and they do their own sort of tuning on top of it. So think of it this way, Felicity. If you and I were to build a website, we wouldn't build our own internet, right? We'd ride on the existing internet and build our own website. That's kind of what's going on in the world of AI, where we're not going to build our own foundational model. We're going to grab one that's out there and we're going to do our own fine tuning and specialization on top of it. That's where I see a lot of the interesting activity going on in Boulder and Denver right now.
Mhm. Yeah, I noticed that AI, it may go down the path almost like AI nationalism, where each country has their own AI, you know, programs and devices, because each country wants to lead the way, but just for their country. There may be many AI, generative AI possibilities out there just run by each country. That's a possibility instead of one worldwide program.
I think it's a really interesting observation. Moreover, um, we're at a geopolitical point where there's so many frictions and fractures that
Mhm.
cooperation about policy and law around artificial intelligence is a real challenge. There are important cautions and concerns about how artificial intelligence will be developed, used, and it would be better state of the world in my perspective if at the international level there was more cooperation between, say, the United States and China, and ideally the Russians. But that's not our world right now. And so it is a world in which there's a fair amount of mistrust and competition and friction on a geopolitical scale. And so I think that accelerates what you said. There's a lack of legal and policy cooperation and a real arms race going on as to whose AI can be better on a nation by nation scale or region by region scale. And that may not be great for the future.
Right. What are the biggest challenges and what are the rewards of working with brand new startups? And just working with brand new entrepreneurs when they come to you? What's the joy and the challenges?
Yeah. New entrepreneurs, and do you write music? You're a guitarist. Do you write your own music?
Not too much, but I have written some things. But the ideas start coming in, and I tend to. People call me the sparkler brain. Sometimes I'm just going off with many, many ideas, and I have a board that keeps me keeps
What a,
things contained because
what
I
a
get
lovely description, the sparkler brain. That's
right.
it, isn't it? Yeah, that throwing off new things. Um, and I think the rewarding thing for me about supporting entrepreneurs who have the sparkler brain is they're moving from the discussion about, hey, wouldn't it be a cool idea if we had this in the world, right? That's the sparkler brain. But they're moving from that to, and let's make it. Let's make it happen. Let's do this, right? We're going to move from the conversation to building a product. They're going to move from a PowerPoint to putting together a team and making real tangible process in the world. And I think that is a leap that is just so fun to watch people move from that moment of inspiration to actually doing it in the world. And to be part of that is one of the joys. The second joy for me is no one goes it alone in the world of entrepreneurship. And I mentioned very few successful, scalable companies are founded by a solo entrepreneur. And if you think about the way that we idolize and make icons out of the founders of companies, Bill Gates at Microsoft, or Steve Jobs at Apple, or Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, now Meta, et cetera. And we go down the list, right? Those stories are myths. That's not the way this works. Like Bill Gates had a team. He met other people who helped create that company. Same thing with Jobs and Zuckerberg. And so the fact that no one goes it alone, first of all, you've got a team, but also it takes so many inputs from outside the company to make these things work. So, for example, you mentioned funding. Whether it's an angel investor, a venture capitalist, that's an outside input. Mentors who are not part of the company, that is, experts who have usually had experience in the startup community, offer their advice to the company. They are enormously important. If you're a founder, you want to talk to people who have seen this movie before, not their first rodeo. Tell me what's coming down the pipe, right? Who would you talk to? And I can go down the line. You need legal experts from outside the company, marketing experts from outside the company, finance. And so it really is a community endeavor to build a successful company. And there's very interesting norms of sharing information, of helping one another that emerge in startup communities that I find to be a joy to be around. In Boulder, Techstars calls this give first. And what it is a mentality that you are asking, how can I give and help somebody else out without asking for anything in return? But it's not altruism or philanthropy. It's a belief that by giving and being part of this system, my benefit that I'm giving to someone else, it will come back to me, but I don't know from whom, I don't know when, and I don't know in what form. And that's a really interesting kind of social capital and trust in a system. I love being part of that. So that's a second joy for me.
Great, great. Yeah, because startups, they've got to, everyone I would think in the company would have to have tremendous patience because things don't happen fast or happen on the time frame that maybe an individual wants it to happen. So I would think patience would be a huge quality that everybody in a company needs to have because it can take years before a company really takes off.
I might recharacterize it as persistence,
Okay.
stubborn stick-to-itiveness,
Yeah.
because um, to me, um, founders need to have the right amount of impatience to believe that this needs to be moving forward. They need to be constantly galvanizing things, running experiments, finding what works and what doesn't work, and constantly in a what I would call kind of a forward-leaning posture.
Mhm.
But to your point, it takes longer than expected. Every startup that you look at, the revenue curve looks like this, right? It's a predictable hockey stick that we're gonna have zero revenues for the first 2 years, a really good year in year three, and then it's gonna go off like crazy in year four. And you look at that and you're like, no, it's not gonna work that way. It's not gonna work that way.
It
Um,
doesn't. I
Never
notice it
does.
5 to 10 years, often
Yeah.
10 years.
So it
10
takes longer than
10 years
people
is like,
think, and that's where you have to have belief and persistence. And that's one of the hardest things about predicting which companies are going to be successful because it's very difficult to in advance know, boy, what level of persistence does this team have? How deep is their resolve? How much pain and suffering and hard work and setbacks are they willing to endure in order to make it as a success? And, you know, um, persistence doesn't guarantee success, but it sure gives you more chances.
yeah,
And so I'd say persistence is one of the most important things that I see.
yeah. And what are the other qualities in an entrepreneur is needed? Creativity, persistence. Um,
Well, for a founder, uh, to me, the most important sale that you're going to make, your first sale, is convincing someone else who's talented and has other options that they need to join your crazy idea.
yeah.
And so a certain amount of charisma and sales and ability to form a team and talk others who are high functioning and could do other things and probably get paid more in the near term to
Mhm.
join your team. That's something that's clearly prized. And then, also as you start to go out and get others involved in your company, I mentioned people who give you money,
Mhm.
mentors to help you. You need to convince people to believe in your vision. You and I might start a company, and in all likelihood, we know steps one, two, five, and 10. And we sort of trust we're going to figure out those other steps we don't know now, but we'll figure it out. But
Yeah.
we need to be able to convince people around us that we're going to get to 10, and they need to see that vision. And so
Mhm.
the ability to sell a vision as to here's where this is going. Yeah, we don't know how all the steps, but don't worry about it. We'll figure that out, but you got to believe in this vision. That gets other people excited about working with you. And then once you get people involved, um, dynamism. Whatever we think today as we're starting the company, we're wrong. And we have to accept that. Doesn't mean that we have to necessarily change our vision as to where we're going, But the way to get there, we need to be open-minded that our hypotheses about the world are wrong. What we thought customers would pay for, they don't want. And you have to be open-minded to hear feedback, including people saying, yeah, you've been killing yourself for 2 years. That part's not going to work. Can you be dynamic and make changes and persistent? That's a hard part of that journey.
Yeah. Especially if someone has a big ego and just gets hurt too badly or is stung by, having to start over or yeah.
A great example, this company has been, it's an older story in the area, but there's a company called Simpos that early on wanted to do high quality educational videos for universities. This was early on in terms of the ability to do this
Mhm,
online.
mhm,
And so John Levisay and his team went out for a couple years, and it turns out selling into universities is just a nightmare. It's really hard to get universities to have money. They take forever to make a purchase, and they were going to die. And so they're like, interesting. So this idea we've been, killing ourselves for a couple years, it's not working. What else could we do? We've got this really interesting ability to create compelling video content. Huh. Felicity, you teach guitar. How would you like to put your guitar videos out there and build communities around the guitar? And then they found other hobbies and crafts that people are super passionate about. It turns out that knitting communities are incredibly passionate individuals. And
yeah.
they found leaders in the world of knitting who want to put their videos up and build communities around it. And so they pivoted from higher education to crafts and hobbyists, and they called it Craftsy. And that was the dynamic move that they made that allowed the thing to become really a big, big success story. Great example.
Huh. Yeah, because nothing works out exactly the way we start. Nothing. We have this big dream and we're going along, but um, so many challenges hit us smack in the face. And we have to solve problems really every day. Every single day, there's something that comes up. So,
100%. And I think it's probably the word to use for it is an art. So this is called pivoting in the world of startups,
mhm,
which is we have an idea, we're going here, but we've hit this dead end.
mhm,
And do we pivot out of that and go in a new direction? Or do we just believe that if we keep going, we're going to go through that wall and we can find a way to tunnel through?
mhm,
And the art of it, the hard part is when do you have enough data that under this enormous conditions of uncertainty, you're like, we just have to make that change now? And when do you say, I don't care what the data says, we just got to keep going? And I think it's a real art to know when to pivot versus when to keep going. And those are hard, hard decisions.
Well, a couple of the kids asked for you to talk about angel investing. They're not sure about how this all works, so they were
Yeah.
curious about that.
Happy to talk about investing. So, and this comes back to you raised the topic of funding a new company. And
Mhm,
so let's talk about that from a broad perspective, and then we'll talk about angel as one way to do it. So
okay.
you and I start a company. One idea is you are an expert guitar teacher. I am a mental tennis coach and a lawyer. Maybe we can sell our services to create revenues that we then use to hire somebody to build a product.
Mhm,
And so, one way to fund your company is find a way to make sales now, and then you use those revenues to build the company. Even if, say, we wanted to build a software product, we could use your guitar lessons and my tennis lessons. Now have a pool of money to build a product, right? So that's one way to fund a company. If you've got a real high technology company where the government is interested, you
hmm,
might get grants. So, for example, we talked about quantum and space. The United States government has a pretty strong interest in advancing those technologies, and therefore grant funding is available. The key thing about a grant is the government doesn't want an ownership interest. They just want to see us build out the technology. That can be a really good way to fund a company, right? Other companies rely upon investors to come in and say, Felicity and Brad, we love what you're doing. Here's $100,000. You give us some percentage of ownership and go build the company, make a big pile of cash. And we don't want $100,000 back. We want $10 million back, right? That's what the investors are hoping. Okay. Those outside investors have different names, and I'll give you three of them. The first is the three F's: friends, family, and fools. And in all likelihood, if we're doing a startup for the first time, we're probably going to go out to your rich aunt and my rich uncle and say, man, you love Felicity, you love Brad, get behind us. We need $50,000. Are you in? Right? So, friends, family, and fools, that's probably the first source of outside investment. Second are these people called angel investors, and they are individuals who want to invest their own money in our company. Often, angel investors have had some success in their own lives. Say they were an entrepreneur or a technologist, they sort of know something about the industry and they want to get behind us. In a best case scenario, you and I don't just get their money, we also get their expertise. We get them believing in our company and helping us build it because we want their cash, but we also want their ideas. So that's an angel investor, someone playing with their own money. Okay. That is in contrast to a venture capitalist. VCs or venture capitalists also will invest in early stage companies, but they are not actually investing their own money for the most part. Venture capitalists, their model is they go out to others and say, hey, we are experts at finding new companies. Give us your money. We will go out and find the new startups and invest it. And then they want to give us money. They want to make more money. And then they give it back to their partners who are like university endowments, insurance companies, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. So the key difference here, angel investors are investing their own money in startups. Venture capitalists, for the most part, are investing other people's money in startups. And that's important because venture capitalists have to get that money back to their bosses. And so they're basically going to usually tell us we have to have our money back in 10 years or less. That's sort of the shorthand version. There's a time frame for venture capital.
Right, right. Great. Because two of the kids, a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, asked the same questions about those. So thank you so much. I'm trying to think what other questions some of the kids asked. I think we've covered a lot of the questions. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot that the kids have asked and that I wanted to ask. Is there anything extra you would like to add? Have we anything extra you feel needs to be talked about?
Well, I'll give a little plug for people who are here in Colorado and watching this, especially in the Front Range area.
Mhm.
I'm the executive director at our Silicon Flatirons Center. Silicon Flatirons is a bridge between a world-class university at CU Boulder and a world-class place to start a new company here in the Boulder, Denver area, the Front Range. And many, if not the vast majority of our events, are publicly available. And so if someone's interested in going further, we have things like the Startup Variety Show. The next one is upcoming on September 9th on campus. Anybody can come. So students who are interested in high school, come on over. You'll see 5 new companies talking about their ideas, talking about the process of building a company. And there'll be about 150 people there, half of them from campus, half of them from the emerging company community, who are there to learn, but also to offer their help to those CEOs and entrepreneurs who are building things. It's a great way to get exposed and involved in the startup community. And so I just want to invite people who are interested, go to the Silicon Flatirons website, part of CU Boulder. And if something looks interesting, come on over.
Oh, great. I'll include that in the links
Awesome.
to this. So, and I'd love to end this interview. Thank you so much with 3 of my own questions. What advice would you give young people today? Just in general, if you could give advice to young people, what would it be?
Get off the device, get into the world.
Yeah.
I'm sure and they probably roll their eyes at me. If you're rolling your eyes at me, then you definitely need to do it.
And the second question I ask is, what gives you hope in this world?
Last night, we had a pitch night with 10 new companies that have been working through our program in Startup Summer. They're all led by undergraduate students. Felicity, I can't tell you the level of inspiration, passion, intelligence on that stage last night. If you were cynical going into that evening, even the hardest heart had to be softened up a little bit. I mean, it was the great cause for optimism. There's people who believe in what they're doing, can create new things. Gives me a lot of hope.
Great. And the third question is, who inspires you?
I've been lucky to have so many mentors. I mentioned no one goes it alone. Our Attorney General, Phil Weiser, brought me into the university, and I can tell you, I've never worked for somebody who is smarter than Phil, and I've never worked for somebody who works harder than Phil. To have somebody like that in government service, I view that as a gift. Part of our Silicon Flatirons Center, I have a mentor named Dale Hatfield, who has seen kind of everything under the sun. And when I come to him with what I think is a new idea, he has this wonderful, gentle way of saying, Brad, you might want to look at this happened in 1992, this happened in 1997, this happened in 2002. But then he honors my idea. And he says, but yours is a little different than those things. And so he has this wonderful way of noting that my idea is not totally new, but honoring the inspiration behind it. And to have a mentor like that, what a gift.
Yeah.
Family, I could go on, but no one goes it alone.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We're all here for each other. And I thank you because you're here for the students, and thank you for doing this interview. And you just had a world of information. I cannot thank you enough. Thank you.
Great questions. Ton of fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, great. All right. For everybody out there, I will have all the links below. So please check out One Voice for Change and the Silicon
Flatirons Center.
Yep. Yeah. I'll have all that information below too. So thank you for watching Career Landscapes, and until next time, bye-bye.